Welcome back to another episode of Your Hope-Filled Perspective, where it's always our goal to restore hope, renew minds, and empower listeners to live in their God-given identity. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Bengtson, and I'm so glad you've decided to tune in today. Today, we're going to be talking to a guest who has had a difficult past, but she's here to tell you that she believes how truly Jesus left the 99 to rescue her and bring her to him. Her message to you is that you are never too lost for God to find you. I want to start off this episode today with Psalm chapter 5, verse 10 that says, "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit in me." Today's guest is friend Tonie Camacho. She's a 53-year-old woman in recovery from alcoholism, drinking since the age of 14. She was sexually abused as a child, raped at age 24, and left for dead. But today, she is a new woman with a thirst for life and the Lord. She believes that with God, all things are possible. Welcome to the program, Tonie.
Thank you. How are you?
I'm excellent. I'm so glad that we're finally getting a chance to connect like this and share the hope that you have found in Jesus with others who might be able to relate to your story.
I am honored to be here. Thank you.
Tonie, so often our passion comes out of our own hurts and trials. What have you gone through that has led you to want to help others?
My entire life I felt like I was alone, and I always wanted other people. I wanted to be loved. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be normal. Whatever normal is, I wanted it. And as I went through my sobriety walk, as I started my recovery, and I realized that God had not left me alone, and I started my ministry and going into jail ministry, I saw other women in the same, and I want them to know that God is there, that they're not by themselves.
Will you tell us a little bit about what led to the use of alcohol as a coping mechanism?
My dad died when I was 14. My first drunk was the day of his funeral. And after that, my mom, I grew up in a very chaotic home. My mom was bipolar. And at that time, they didn't have a diagnosis for it. I don't even think that they had medicine for it. So after my dad died, I was devastated. I was left with my mom, who was very abusive, both verbally and physically. And I just thought life was over. So I started drinking, skipping school. I moved out of my mom's home when I was 15. Had a son at 19. And in between that, it was completely turbulent. And the drinking just continued to get worse. After I was raped when I was 24, and that began. I played with drugs for a little bit, but the drugs were easier to walk away from than alcohol, because alcohol is illegal, so you could do that whenever. And I just did it. The more that I got drunk, I felt that I didn't think. But then the depression set in with that. So I did this lifestyle all the way until I was 48. I had been in law enforcement. I was in law enforcement for 12 years. I received 3 DWIs in the same month. My third DWI, I took 35 Xanaxes and drank half a bottle of Tito's, and I was going to go lay down in a pasture to die. I went to a jail cell, woke up the next morning, and I was angry. So I drank out of the bleach mop bucket because I was so embarrassed and humiliated. I was a deputy, and I would in a cell. They put me in an empty tank by myself, and then God on the third day said, "It's not your turn, it's my turn." And that was 5 years ago, and he has never left.
Wow. How did you come to the point where you knew you needed help?
When I didn't want to live anymore, because I have a son. I have an older son, and I have a young stepdaughter. And not a suicidal person. To me, that's very devastating for a family to have to deal with. So I knew that something was wrong with me at that time. I knew that I needed help.
And I think people who don't struggle with addiction maybe have a difficult time understanding the power that it can have over us. And it sounds like that first drink was a way to try to numb the pain or to cope with the loss. What continued it?
I'm sorry.
What continued your use? I mean, what was the motivation behind that? Did you find acceptance in other people who drank?
It took away all my fear. It took away all my fear. I could do anything. I could dance, I could sing, I could do anything. And I felt like the people that I hung out with accepted me. Not that I ever saw the damage or the danger that I was in, but it was, I had friends. I was drinking, laughing, having a great time, and everybody liked that. And I wasn't afraid of people. I wasn't afraid to be alone at that time. So I was just a party girl.
And then when did the real depression set in?
I had probably struggled with depression my whole life, especially my teenage years. I didn't know it at the time. So as I went through my 20s, I went up and down. I had 2 failed marriages, had a son out of wedlock. And I didn't have, I mean, I have always believed in God, but I didn't have the walk or the relationship that I have with him now. So I never noticed. But once I came to the third DWI and I sat in that jail cell, it was amazing at the message that I heard. And then after I was sober for 15 months, I started realizing every single blessing, every single time that God had protected me. It all made sense. Everything made sense.
Was there something specific that started bringing that realization?
I think having a clear mind, first of all, having everything out of my system. But my saving grace was not only in that jail cell, but when I heard Corey Asbury's version of Reckless Love, and he explained Jesus' parable of leaving the 99 to find that one sheep, there was just something that clicked. It was like, I'm that one. I'm that one. Every single time I turned my back on him, I could tell, I could see now. I can see now. All I had to do was turn around. He was right there every step of the way. There were drug houses I was in. There were bars that I went home with people I didn't know. There were times that I woke up that I didn't remember how I got there. And I know that he was there because I wouldn't be here today if he wasn't there. And you just feel that. I just feel that.
What do you think was the greatest lesson you learned once you decided to pursue sobriety?
The greatest lesson learned, I guess, that God has loved me all along. When it says that God never changes, that he is the same every day, and that he loves us no matter what we do, it was proven. He could have let me die. He could have let me die on June the 16th, 2016, but he didn't. He put me in a jail cell, made sure I had a blanket and a pillow, and he woke me up the next morning. And at my desperation, he didn't turn away. He didn't say I was too dirty. He didn't say I was unworthy. He walked me through it.
You know, that reminds me of Jesus and the woman at the well.
Yes.
You know, he knew before he even spoke a word to her what her past was. She didn't know he knew. But he was willing, first of all, he went out of his way to go to Samaria.
Right? Yes.
Then he talked with a Samaritan woman, which was prohibited in that time. And he didn't reject her. He loved her despite her sin.
Yes.
And what a transformation that was, because then she left him and she told others about him, which is exactly what you are doing now.
Yes.
I know you've shared about being in the jail cell and waking up the next morning, and I can only imagine the anger at waking up because I have experienced those times in my life when I was like, Lord, if this is going to be my life, I'm not sure I want to live this way.
Yes.
What did it take? And how did you really come to know that God was for you? Given that it would be so easy, Tonie, to blame God that your dad died, that your mom had mental illness, that she was abusive, that you were raped. It would be so easy to blame God. So, what turned it around for you to know, no, God is for Tonie?
Because I know people always say that they hear God. I heard God say, and I never heard that my whole life. I'm like, he doesn't even talk to me. But I promise, as you and I are sitting here and I can see you and hear you, I heard him say, it's not your turn, it's my turn. And I made a deal with him. If you show up and show me who you are, I will do whatever you want me to do. Has it been easy? Absolutely not. My marriage is not my husband is not the same faith-based as I am. I'm going to plan there sometimes. But in my third DWI should have sent me to state jail. And that's what I was facing. And when I came through and it was dismissed, I knew. He said, I kept my end of the deal. Now what are you going to do?
Wow.
And he's done that. I have so many testimonies, Michelle. If we had time, my whole life is a testimony, and it all became very clear. And the more that I dive into the word, the more that I see. It was like I was meant. He chose me a long time ago. It just took me realizing that I needed to stop digging my heels in.
He chose you, and he was waiting for you to choose him.
Yes.
Friends, we're going to take a real short commercial break, but I want you to stick around to hear Tonie share more about how you can know that you are never too lost for God. We'll be right back. Welcome back to your Hope-Filled Perspective, where my guest today is Tonie Camacho. And Tonie, your testimony is one that I think so many people need to hear, because life and the enemy of our soul would like us to believe when bad things happen to us, that God's not for us, that God must not love us, that we're not acceptable. And those are all lies from the enemy. You've shared how for many years your coping mechanism was alcohol. But I know so many of our listeners struggle with other forms of addiction. It
Yes.
could be drugs, it could be shopping, it could be sex, it could be gambling. For me, for many years, it was working too much.
Right.
That was a form of addiction. It was an idol.
Absolutely.
So not everybody's form of addiction is going to look the same. You've been sober for how long?
5 years. It was 5 years, June the 24th.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's no small feat, especially when the majority of your life was spent addicted.
It's God's grace.
It is God's grace.
God's grace.
But for our listener who might be working really hard to break the bonds of addiction, will you share what keeps you from backsliding into alcohol? Wouldn't it be so easy to go back to that?
Absolutely. It's easy. It's a daily struggle. But the way that I look at it, the way that I beat it, once I realized everything that God had done for me, if I took a drink, it would be like me thumbing my nose up at him saying, I got it from here, God. And I don't. So my biggest thing is not that we can disappoint God, because he loves us regardless of who we are. But I walk that walk. I don't want to disappoint him. I don't want to let him down. He saved me. I want to show him that I'm going to keep my end of the bargain, whatever he asks me to do, as far out of my comfort zone as I am at this moment. and probably will be down the road, I'm going to say yes, because I know he's not, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that that storm is not going to last forever. And he's on the other side with his hand open.
Are there certain experiences or certain environments that make staying sober more difficult?
At first there was, yes. The first 2 years, I could not go into a bar, couldn't be around anyone that was high. You know how some people, when they're high, they suck their teeth or they make different noises. I couldn't be around that. Alcohol, the smell of alcohol made my mouth water. So it was hard. I'll tell you how funny God's sense of humor is, though. As when I first got out of jail, I was on probation. I got 15 months probation instead of jail time. And he stuck me at a place for my community service called Hope Station here in Palestine. And it is a mission for homeless people. So we had several walks of life come in: high, drunk, stoned, homeless, dirty. And it was like he tested me every step of the way to see if I would walk back or walk forward. I have another testimony within that for another time, but he put a girl in a woman that was me. It was me. Everything about her aggravated me. Everything about her, it was like I couldn't make sense to her. Everything I walked through with her, God showed me. And she goes to my church now. She's in a recovery group here that my church is part of. Great recovery, right? Great recovery. So he answers our prayers, but he walks us through our own. He teaches us through ourselves.
Does being Christian make recovery easier?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Does it make it, it makes it easier as far as God puts the right people in your path? Mm-hmm. But no, because when you're on the right path with God, the enemy jumps up every time and he attacks something. He's great. He's great at attacking my family. I think that as we go in our walk, the further you go in your walk, the further you get into the word, you see what you have, the tools that God has given you to fight against that. Iron sharpens iron. So I surround myself with other Christian women. Being a part of recovery and doing jail ministry and watching Rock Bottom Ranch here in Palestine puts me with people like me. So people that are walking through what I've already walked through. But I learn something every day from people that are still struggling. So I think it's just a daily thing. It's a daily thing. And I think Christianity doesn't make it easier, but when you know who God is, yes.
But I think that's true for all of us, that surrender is a daily choice. And sometimes it's a moment by moment choice.
Yes, minute by minute.
Tell me about your experience in jail ministry. What is that like for you? And does that stir up memories of when you were in jail?
I honestly don't put myself or my experience in jail back, because the women that I see, that I have seen, these are women that have been in and out of jail their entire life. They go out, they come back, they go out and come back. I was a jailer at one time, so I never understood that. I would ask, I would, as a jailer in a uniform, thinking that I was better than them, not understanding. It has made me understand that some of these women have nowhere to go. They don't have shelter. They don't have food. They don't have medical attention. They're not safe on the street. They're safe in jail. And that breaks my heart. But at the same time, John wrote most of the books of his that he wrote for the Bible were written in prison. So God, I know that God can touch the least of us in the worst, ugliest, dirty spots. So I just let them know that they're loved, and that God works with all of us.
Yeah. What an important ministry that is, because how lonely must that be to be in jail? to be away from friends, from family, from social support. And yet
Absolutely.
you're being the hands and feet of Jesus to them. What's the hardest part about that ministry?
The hardest part, probably not being able to get through to some of them, and you just want to shake them and you can't. You can't. It's not my job to save them. I just plant the seed and God lets it grow. Sometimes I walk away wondering if I did a good job. Sometimes I have to remind myself that I am not responsible for that, that God is. But I come home, sometimes I come home and I cry. I cry and it's like, God, can I save her? Can I fix her? And he gently reminds me that that's not my job. But sometimes it really hurts. It really hurts. It just hurts. But I keep praying. God has answered. He's answered so many prayers. So I trust him. I have to trust him.
I can relate to that because as a mental health provider, so often I can see what patients need,
Yes.
but I can't make them do what I
Right.
recommend they do. They've got
Right.
to make the choice and they have to decide they want it bad enough
Yes.
to try a different way.
Yes.
And the old and the familiar is comfortable,
Yes.
even if it's being in jail.
Yes.
But what would you say to the woman who's not in a physical jail, but she is in a jail of sorts by being addicted, whether it's alcohol or drugs or sex or work? What would you say to the woman who's in that kind of a jail?
Wow. He had to go there. I would tell her that she is strong, that she is beautiful, that she is a child of God, and all she has to do is cry out to him. He's not gonna, he may not show up in 30 seconds. He might not show up in 30 minutes, but he's right there. And if she cries out and she just wants that change, he will walk her through it. Her walk may be like mine, her walk may be nothing like mine. Yes, it's a constant battle, but if she cries out to him, he will put the right people and the right tools for her. But she has to listen. She has to listen. She has to be ready for that change and accept that she is strong. And sometimes that's hard. I couldn't look at myself in a mirror for a long time. I had all my mirrors in my home. My husband thought I was crazy. I would hang towels over my mirrors because I didn't like who I was. I could remember my past all the time. But help me, I cannot remember the scripture, but it says that once you're a child of Christ, the past no longer is you. You're a new person made in Christ. I believe with all my heart. So the mirrors started coming back on the wall, and I started liking who I saw in the mirror.
And I think it's important for us to mention too that we don't have to feel strong. And in truth, we don't even have to be strong.
Right.
Because God says that it's in our times of weakness
That he is
that
strong.
he is strong.
Yes.
And I think sometimes for us, that's half the battle because we think it's all on us. We've got to be
Right.
able to do it ourselves. It
Right.
takes a little bit of pride. But if we're willing to say, you know what, God, I can't do it without you. That's
Right.
when he goes, good. That's when I'm
Because I want you to lean on
for.
me.
That's
Yes.
right.
Yes.
You know, Tonie, part of what I want to do in this program is not only to help the listener who can identify with the topic we're talking about, but I also want to help us become more sensitive to others
Yes.
who might be struggling.
Yes.
Can you help share what are things we should and shouldn't say to someone who is struggling with addiction, or maybe things we should or shouldn't do In my own life, I know people have said things and they were the best intentioned,
Right.
but they hurt me. They caused more damage. So I want to help people understand what is helpful and what is not.
Being helpful to someone that has, I'm going to use my husband for an example. I suffered with anxiety and depression. He doesn't believe in that. He doesn't believe that there's psychiatrists are not okay, medicines are not okay. If you want to quit drinking, you want to stop getting high, just walk away from it. You can do it. You don't have a problem. So my thing would be, if you don't know about alcoholism, if you don't know about any kind of drug addiction, and you don't understand the rewiring of our brains when those chemicals take over, if you want to help that person, maybe listen to them, maybe Google it, research alcoholism, and find out that it's a disease. It's not because the person wants to stop. I'm sorry. Alcoholism is a beginning. In the beginning, yes, we want to self medicate ourselves. Yes, we want to fix that hurt. But once that alcohol has been there so long, it does rewire someone's brain and they can't help it. So don't make fun of them if they can't. Don't tell them if they tell you that they've been 2 days sober. Don't offer them a drink. Don't say, "Girl, you can handle this," because we can't. We can't. I know that if I ever go back to drinking, I won't come back out of it this time. I know that. Even though I trust and I have all the faith in God, I know that my addiction cannot be revisited. So when you meet someone, acknowledge what they tell you. Try to have empathy, try to have compassion. If you don't have the right answer, just listen, and then maybe point them to an AA meeting, maybe point them to a church. If you go to a church, ask them if they want to speak to your pastor. If you're part of a women's ministry, ask if there's the older women that are more wise, ask them to speak to them. But just try to listen. If you don't understand what their addiction or their illness is about, just listen, because sometimes it's just letting them get it off their chest. That's important. We don't always want someone to tell us it's okay. Sometimes we just want someone to hug us and say, "It's okay. I'm right here," and just listen, or let the tears flow. Give them a lap to lay their head in, let them sleep or something.
Friends, we're going to take a real short commercial break. But I'm going to ask Tonie when we come back to share with you her hope-filled perspective. We'll be right back. Welcome back to your hope-filled perspective, where today we've really been talking about how God can take us out of the pit and give us a new life. We're talking about the fact that you're never too lost for God to find you, despite what you think in your own mind. Tonie, if someone is listening today and they are struggling with some kind of addiction, what could they begin to implement today? Just a small step to start making a positive change forward.
Put down that bottle, put down that glass of wine. Leave the bar. Call a taxi home. Don't go home with another man that you don't know. Go somewhere in a private room and pray. Just say, "God, I'm ready," and leave the rest to Him.
I think so often with addiction, it really comes back to wanting to be in control.
Yes.
And the way God's economy works is He wants us to surrender that control and let Him take it. The burdens in this life are so heavy that they cause us to want to be in control so that we can handle it. But really, God wants to take those from us. Tonie, if a listener is struggling with alcoholism or some other form of addiction, or maybe they love someone who is. What hope-filled perspective would you want to offer them today?
That person can change. That person can change with the right support group, with the right partner, the right friends. They can change, and there is hope because there are people willing to help and not hurt.
And that's what God wants more than anything,
Yes.
is to help us make that change
Yes.
and to let Him help us and get us through what has led to the addiction in the first place. Friends, I want to leave you with Psalm 27, verse 1, that says, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Whom shall I be afraid?" We've been talking today about addiction. And really, what it really comes back down to is we need God to be our source of strength.
Yes.
We're not strong enough. Tonie's not strong enough in her own right, but
Amen.
she is when she recognizes her weakness and relies on God.
Yes.
Tonie, thank you for sharing of the hurts and the trials that you've gone through to offer comfort to others, because God offered comfort to you. I pray
Yes.
blessings on your ministry because He's going to use you in a mighty way
Thank you.
for all you went through. Friends, if anything in this episode today has resonated with you, if it's encouraged you, if it's caused you to consider things differently, would you consider sharing this episode with a friend who just might need a dose of hope today? And if you enjoy this podcast, please consider subscribing, rating, and reviewing to help other people find a biblically based, hope-filled perspective. As always, I've been your host, Dr. Michelle Bengtson, and I'm so glad you spent a few minutes of your day with us. Until next week, may you have a hope-filled